Welcome, beautiful people, to Rice Crypto. I'm Rice, and today I am joined by a returning guest, Lynette Zang, making her 16th appearance on the channel. I did make a mistake in the beginning of the interview and said it was our 15th time together, when in fact, it was our 16th time. And with that being said, I will include links down below in the video description and the pinned comment for the playlist that I created with all of her previous appearances. Definitely check those out. But let's go ahead and get into today's conversation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is a returning guest, the second person I've ever interviewed on the channel. She's been on the channel now, including today, 15 times since 2018. Welcome, Lynette Zang. Lynette, I really appreciate you coming back on the show. How you doing today?
I will always come on your show, Chris. You know I love you, and I'm glad that you keep count because I never keep count, but 15 times. Wow, good.
Well, I have a playlist, and it makes it real easy to kind of go back and just make sure I'm looking at the correct numbers. So I have to default to the playlist, and it tells me how many videos are in there. There's 17, 2 are clips. Actually, I split one of the interviews up in 2, and then there was a clip. So that's where the 2 extra videos came into play. So yeah, this is going to be the 15th time, and I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation as always. And I'll have links down below for your website, your new website, which people can find at LynetteZang.com. We'll have links for your X account, so people can follow you at the Lynette Zang. We'll also have links for your YouTube channel. And I definitely encourage people, if you're not already subscribed to Lynette's new YouTube channel, make sure you are subscribed. Again, links will be down below in the video description. And normally I kind of prepare with some questions and things like that. And I kind of have some things I want to talk about, but I wanted to make today's conversation just more of a conversation. And there was a few things as far as the economic financial side. And then I'd like to dive into cryptocurrency, talk about Bitcoin, because we haven't really done that fully. You went to the XRP conference. I'd like to get your thoughts about all that. But the few things that I want to talk about regarding the financial market is, and you can choose where you want to start, the Petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia. There's been a lot of talk about that. And with the research I've done, I can't actually see where there was a signed agreement for people to think that wasn't renewed. So it seemed like it was just more of a verbal thing. The New York Times reported that there was an agreement, but I'm not seeing any documentation of that. Then we have the banking crisis, which seems to be getting worse. And the last thing in that element is the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates. And would that signal the market turmoil once the Fed drops interest rates? Because a lot of people seem to be excited about the interest rates being dropped, but I'm kind of hearing from people that are a little bit more studied in this that that's going to signal market turmoil. So where would you like to begin with those three topics?
Wow, they're all really good topics. So why don't we just take them in that order that you put out, because I think that's a great order. Okay, and for one thing, I also could not find, and I've been studying this forever, a signed document. The reality is that Henry Kissinger established that relationship where we would support through army and all of that the Saudi government, and in exchange they would sell their oil for dollars. And because they were so influential in that whole oil region, everybody would follow them. They would take that money and buy bonds, because quite honestly, I don't think the Saudi government was particularly sophisticated at that time. And so that was the agreement that was struck, and that's when the petrodollar was born. But the reality is the US dollar started losing its status back in 99 when the euro was created to take over for it. However, the euro has not fared very well either, but what we've seen is a significant drop in global usage over the last 5 years, from 70% to 49% now of the US dollar being used in trade. Now, a lot of what's been happening has also been the SWIFT, which is the US's version of how to move money globally around the world, and they are pedaling just as fast as they can to stay relevant, because what is actually happening in here is that there is a new global financial plumbing that's being put in, not just by the BRICS, but by a number of countries that would eliminate the US dollar as the world reserve currency. But the reality is it hasn't been the world reserve currency for quite some time. So the relevance of the Saudis joining the BRICS nations and allowing their oil to be purchased by other currencies, well, that's actually been happening for a while. It's just that we are in a completely different regime now over in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, we are losing our status as the world reserve currency, but then the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, back in '69, created the substitution fund, where anybody that's holding dollars or dollar-denominated assets can make a deposit, and those assets or financial instruments, it's hard for me to call that garbage assets. I mean, honestly, because it's just debt-based garbage and lots of bets and debts and all of that. But at any rate.
Is that different than the SDR?
Pardon?
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Is that different than the SDR?
No, the IMF's currency of choice is the SDR, and that's a basket of currencies. So good to your point, Chris. They deposit this dollar-denominated asset into the substitution fund, and then the substitution fund converts it into an SDR-denominated asset.
Okay.
That was created in '69. Before the petrodollar was created. But in 2009, they pulled out all of those mechanisms and they tested them to make sure that they work. And so they are working, but they'll use them most likely during this next crisis to make the final shift. And what that will do for the IMF's SDR is make it the most traded currency on the planet, and it'll shift that. I really don't think a lot of the power will shift to the West, so to China and Russia, to the BRICS nations. But really, I think the power is going to be held at the IMF. Keeping in mind that that's almost every central bank chief and every global treasury secretary. But yeah, the US status, in theory, it's a way to regulate the return of dollars to the US so that they can control the rate of inflation and give us a controlled implosion, which is what I'm seeing from our own Federal Reserve as well as other central banks. They want to keep control of it, but the IMF is creating the SDR into an international currency. So, and it makes sense because there's no limitations on how many currencies they can put in this basket. So they can put every single currency in this. Now there's a universal umbrella where all of the trading in currencies happen, but then it gets easily translated into whatever that local currency is. And that's what the dollar will become, just a local currency. And it'll be very, very painful for those of us that are not prepared with physical right.
Now, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get to that point, though. Would you agree? I mean, it seems that, and just even looking at that one website, which pulling up here, the Atlantic tracker for the dollar dominance. I mean, we still have 58% share of the global foreign exchange reserves, 54% of export invoicing, and 88% share of foreign exchange transactions. So, I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time for the dollar to be completely derailed unless this whole reset of a financial system is designed for that purpose as well. And I think that's going to kind of even the playing field for all the local currencies. And you mentioned BRICS Nation and IMF and Bank of International Settlements and some of the things that they're doing behind the scenes with basically cryptocurrencies, central bank digital currencies, digital programmable currencies, using things like the M bridge, which would be a way for these different currencies to connect.
Exactly.
And then the Fed now is kind of like a US version of the bigger version of the Enbridge. And there's other things in addition to the Enbridge, but everything is designed to make everything interoperable.
Yep.
And then I think the value will also be even, where you don't have these exchange rates as much as we've had in the past either. It'll be an even ratio exchange.
Right. We are going into a completely new system where the dollar is not dominant anymore. And that's going to be very, very painful for most of the population in this country. But yes, to your point, and once the new plumbing for all of these digital currencies and the surveillance system and all of that is in place, I mean, I don't know. In theory, I guess they can turn one on, make sure it works okay, and then just turn off the other system. But let me tell you, they need us to feel a lot of pain. It's kind of like the wars that are going on. There are people that know a whole lot more than I do about what's happening in cyberspace, and they believe that World War III is already taking place. But the public can't see that. It's invisible, right? Until it's too late to do anything about anyway. So they need a physical war, boots on the ground. The financial war is being played. They need the public to be distracted by something, and the lives that are lost during these physical wars are just collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not I don't care that, theories are great, but in practicality, we better be as independent and self-sufficient as possible, because they need a huge crisis to get us to buy into the system that they want us to buy in.
That makes sense. And the other two questions, I mean, I think the banking crisis is kind of been made worse by the fact that we have higher interest rates. So lowering their interest rates would have an effect. So I know that's kind of connected. But when it comes to the Fed and dropping the interest rates, which is people are speculating will take place in September. The next meeting, I think, is the end of this month, the 31st of July. And then I think after that is in September, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of people are speculating that. Now, I was thinking that the Federal Reserve was going to do everything that it could to make everything look nice for Biden, because he's a sitting president who's running again. But now there's speculation, and he's probably not going to be running. He's probably going to drop out or be replaced, which means that the Federal Reserve doesn't have to play the political game that they normally would play with a sitting president who's running again, trying to make everything look nice. So the Fed can pretty much, I don't feel like they're beholden in that aspect. So I'm curious what you think about what's going to happen with the Federal Reserve. And when they do drop interest rates, is that a signal for market turmoil?
Well, first of all, it is a signal that market turmoil is occurring. So they're not going to drop interest rates until this next crisis. And what we've seen is that employment is a big key in this, because why do they raise? I mean, first of all, let's back up. What is the point of interest rates? It's to regulate the rate and speed of inflation. That's the tool, the key tool that they've had over all these years, particularly since 1971, when the control of inflation was given to the Federal Reserve and the central banks. So why did they ratchet that up, right? First of all, you can look at this long-term trend on interest rates since 1981, when actually intraday, the interest rates were pushed up. The short-term rates were pushed up to 21.5%. They closed at, I think, 18.5 or something like that. So they gave themselves lots and lots of ramp room. So every time we hit a stumbling block, you can look on the Federal Reserve charts to the official recessions, because they can determine whether it's a recession or not, but the official recessions, and you'll see that the next step was to drop interest rates all the way down, stimulate inflation, stimulate more borrowing and spending. And then when they wanted to slow that down, they'd hike interest rates up, usually about 5.5%, 5.75%, so that they could drop them down again, which is exactly what they've been doing inside of this crisis. But they held zero interest rates for 15 years. So all of the banks are about 68% underwater, interest rates, market value of debt. And what do the banks do? They take on lots and lots of debt, right? They issue lots and lots of debt. So that means mortgages, credit card loans, student loans, along with the bonds and all of that stuff. So they are significantly underwater to the market value if they have to liquidate. We've got banking crisis that is unfolding right now. And I'm going to even say on a global basis, because just recently we've seen 40 banks fail in China. And in the US, with the rise of the fintech, which were not banks and not regulated, but created relationships with smaller banks, and they've got up to 10 million. It's kind of hard to figure out exactly how many people are locked out, but up to 10 million people locked out of their accounts, because when the financial technology firms partnered with those banks, they now sold it as if your funds were FDIC insured. But in a lot of cases, they didn't make it into the FDIC insured. So now it was 85 million that was missing, right? Because of hypothecation. In other words, using your deposits, using your equity for leverage to borrow and trade and do all of this. Now it's up to 95 million. I mean, who really knows? But there are a minimum of 22 banks that are part of this debacle. And these people, up to 10 million people, are locked out of their bank accounts. Well, let's see. If you're locked out of your bank account, when you finally have access to that money again, are you going to leave it in there?
You're probably going to take all of it out.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, so we've got all of these bank runs. Can they unlock that money again? They are really, they meaning the central banks and meaning the whole fintech financial sector, is in a huge hurt dance. And it's not just the small banks, the regional banks, the community banks. It's the big banks too. So you could say that were they not locked out, we would be facing bank runs, who knows how many, because they keep this so opaque. And there are more and more fintech companies that are being named. And nobody's really talking about that. You don't hear about the 40 banks that just failed in China. You don't hear about at least the minimum 22 banks that are tied in with Synapse that have locked all of their customers out of their accounts, let alone the money that was held at Synapse in their brokerage accounts. I mean, banking crisis, it ain't even marginally over. We can't see it yet.
Right.
Get out.
Now,
that protects you.
Would you, I mean, I think I know the answer here, but would you say that this is done by design so they can consolidate the banking system down to the few?
100%. I mean,
to me, it makes it easier for what's coming.
Look, what I find so flipping fascinating is, and remember, I was a new stockbroker in the 80s, and everything was about globalization, globalization, globalization. When I remember saying to myself, yeah, I could see some problems with this. And we shipped all those manufacturing jobs offshore, right? And so now all you hear talk of is deglobalization, deglobalization, deglobalization.
Nationalization, yeah.
Exactly, except that is just a ruse, right? To get you to look over here, deglobalization, because what I'm seeing is greater integration and greater globalization in the financial sector, because it is so much easier to control one entity than a whole bunch of itty bitty entities. Much easier to control. So deglobalization, yeah, well, not really. Not really. It's just another big fat lie.
And at the same time, there's so much happening all around the world that it's easy to get distracted, and it's hard to focus on the things that need to be focused on because there is so much happening, and it's just this, a big, huge distraction as to what's going on with the entire system. And I don't think they're exactly 100% ready for that new system, which is why they keep prolonging and keeping this obviously dead entity on life support.
Yeah,
which is absolutely insane. And I would have thought the American public would have woken up by now a little bit, but
they are
to a degree. I mean, they're still leaving money in banks.
Oh, they're still leaving money in banks, but look at what they're doing at Costco and Amazon and Walmart. They're selling gold and silver.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, they would not be selling gold and silver if the demand was not there. And they're selling it in huge quantities. Now, do I think that's where you should buy your gold and silver? No, they have no buyback policy, no guidance. Nobody understands why. They're just selling gold and silver because they can and because that demand is there. This gives me huge hope. And you know what else gives me huge hope? The fact that the federal government changed the classification of marijuana. Why did they do that? Because of all of the states that legalized it. So there was pressure, there was a ground roots pressure. So I see that, and I see what's happening with, and we're seeing the run on the banks and the run to gold and silver in many parts of the world, China being one of them, the most controlled population on the planet. They are losing, meaning the governments, the central banks, they are losing control of. Yay! Yay! Because we need to stand up and take our power back. And you know how we can do that? Peacefully, because I don't believe in violence, and I don't think that it's necessary. You want to take your power back? Quiet protest. You convert this garbage into sound money, physical, in your possession. No counterparty risk, the most functionality because it's used in every single sector of the global economy. That's why it's never gone to zero. So yeah, I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope. I want us to have a seat at the table. Thank you.
Since you mentioned it, I just wanted to share this with you because somebody made a really cool stamp on it.
That is really cool.
A nice little 1 ounce silver with a nice little flower on it.
Yep. But I mean, there are more of us than there are of them. This is my vote. This is my vote. And the other thing, because I know we're going to talk about the cryptocurrencies as well, is that we're seeing more gold backing, right? Until you can convert with Tether. Didn't Tether just come out?
They did that recently, but there's been other cryptocurrencies that have had gold backed. I think Paxful or Paxos. I can't remember the exact name of the project, but there's a couple of different, and it's kind of in a sense gone almost a step in the direction of the real world assets, which is tokenization of everything with a uni ledger, as BlackRock would like to put it.
Yeah. Everybody, those in power have control and know where everything is. And to your point, like Glint, I'm not sure about Pax Gold, but I know Glint, you can actually take physical possession of the underlying gold. And I'm good with any currency that is backed by gold as long as you can convert into that gold. If you can't convert it, it doesn't mean kakalaka. It just doesn't.
I agree. And it's just one of these, sometimes it's a way for a sell point to say that you're going to have something that's stable, that's not affected by the dollar and other fiat currencies. Sometimes it's just a gimmick. I'm not a big fan of gold-backed cryptocurrencies at all. I am obviously a fan of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, and I see that being a double-edged sword. It's technology that can be used against us, and it's technology that can be used to free us. So it depends on how we utilize the technology and what we allow to be done with the technology. And that's where I kind of want to take part of this conversation and then kind of get into the idea of programmable currencies and central bank digital currencies. But you went to the XRP conference, which was that like 2 months ago, and something that like was May. Okay. What did you think? And that was your first cryptocurrency event, right?
That was, yes.
What were your thoughts? I'm not a huge XRP fan necessarily, but what are your thoughts about going to a cryptocurrency conference and an XRP conference in general?
I would do it every single time. And the reason is because people that go into cryptocurrencies have a similar kind of head. They want to be outside of the system to people that buy gold. So I actually went there to build community because I know that's really what I have to do. For me, it is not divide and conquer. It is bring everybody together. We don't have to agree 100% on everything. But I think what we can all agree on is that we want to have control over our financial destiny, that we should have that control back. I'm not convinced that anything that's on the internet and intangible actually will do that. I don't know who's going to survive. And the other part of it is who's controlling that, right? Who's controlling it? I was reading an article on a Bitcoin, which is having, I guess, not a great week this week because they're talking about all of this excess supply coming on the market. I know there was a halving.
Yeah, well, the sell pressure is a combination of the Mt. Gox exchange that was in existence that got hacked. A lot of those funds are starting to be returned. They're starting that process, which has been ongoing, but it looks like it's actually going to start taking place. And then we've seen Germany dumped a bunch of Bitcoin for whatever reason, and then even bought some Bitcoin. So I'm not sure what they're testing out over there, but that's kind of, there's a lot of sell pressure right now going on. And this kind of happens. You mentioned the halving. It kind of happens because of minor capitulation to catch up with the cost of what it actually costs to mine these Bitcoin for the energy consumption. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm glad that you did because you're an expert in this area. I know a lot about it because obviously it is akin to what I'm doing. And I also know how much more money would have gone into this had they not created that. And the timing is kind of interesting on it. I'm just not convinced that it's outside of the realm of those that are currently in power controlling it. I would have felt much better had Bitcoin not been so easily and readily adopted by Wall Street, because I don't trust Wall Street. And I was a stockbroker for many years, and I was a banker for many years. And so that's the challenge that I have with it, and it's intangible. Because one thing I know, if you don't hold it, you don't own it, it is a contract. And like we're seeing with Mt. Gox, right? Any contract is only as good as the other person or the other entity in that contract. So that's where my hesitation in that comes from. But I know that if I'm holding physical gold and physical silver, that's in my control. Can they control the spot market? Heck yeah. With intangibles, they can create as much of this stuff as they want to, but it's not real. When you get into something that's physical, there's a finite amount. I don't care if there's a whole bunch more gold in the Grand Canyon, like somebody asked me the other day. Even if there is, there's still a finite amount of it, and you're holding it.
And I mean, the fact that you have an intangible asset, I get where some people can't wrap their head around that because you can't touch it, you can't feel it, it just doesn't feel real, and that completely makes sense. I am a fan of Bitcoin because, go ahead.
It's more than that. Look, when I first became a stockbroker, I went to Shearson because at that time they had the best training program on the street, and that training program was a 2.5-year program. And so, and I can tell you, it was a very intense program. I was living in Florida at the time, so lots of warm weather. And they sent me to Chicago in February. And I'm driving on Michigan Avenue and seeing all of these icicles on the cars. And I went, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Now, I did grow up in cold country, so it took me a minute. But that 2.5-year program was not about helping me understand the language of the markets. It was in teaching me how to sell the sizzle and not the steak. In other words, how you sell an intangible. valuable. In fact, I'll give you something that I use to this day, and this was back in the 80s, and I use this all the time. So for any of you out there, I'll give you this little tidbit. It's fabulous. If you do something and it doesn't work the way you think it should work or want it to work, you don't beat yourself up over it. You say to yourself, what did I do right to get as far as I got? What can I do righter to get even further? Now, I know that I bunny trailed there for a minute, but that was just such a valuable lesson to me. But the point is, pardon?
I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, the point is that what they teach you in that arena is how to sell an intangible instrument. And I remember it was all about gather that money in house, because prior to that in the 70s, everybody held their certificates. Well, if you're holding your certificate, your ownership certificate, guess what does not and cannot happen? Your equity cannot be used by these guys that write the laws. So it was, and they pay you on an ongoing basis as a stockbroker to hold these assets in-house. Because when it's held in-house, guess what you become? You become the beneficial owner. But the legal owner is DTC, who is owned by all of these big banks that create all of these derivative products, all of these intangible products, and they gamble with your equity. And that is happening to Bitcoin because Wall Street has adopted it and created all these derivatives on it. At this point, I have no problem with intangible assets. I just understand how they play the game because I lived for many years in the belly of the beast.
Well, what they're doing to Bitcoin, they have done to gold and silver for years. Anything that is a threat to the system, they're going to try to put it on a leash and control it. And that's the situation with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a threat to the system. So they want to do what they can to stifle that threat, throttle it as much as they possibly can. And not so cutting off the on and off ramps, that would be something. But then that doesn't kill the whole idea of peer-to-peer. We're still able to do that. You could take these technologies and fork the technologies. The other thing about Bitcoin that I specifically like, now I'm not a coder myself, but it's open source. And there's people that have been in the tech space, cryptographers, whatever it may be, that have gone through and audited the code. And there's been bugs and discrepancies and things from the very beginning that have been corrected, which you'll find with a lot of technologies. But aside from that, this thing is completely open source, completely transparent. So it's not as if there's like backdoors in there that could really hinder what Bitcoin itself is. There's no traps in the blockchain that were built that people haven't noticed, is basically what I'm getting at. So there are other cryptocurrencies that allow for more control. Something like Ethereum has more centralization. A lot of the stable coins, they're using Ethereum, they're using Solana and blockchains that have more centralization, because with programmable currency, they can freeze people's accounts. Tether and USDC has worked with government agencies, helping them with criminals. So the idea of we're not going to get a central bank digital currency in the United States. We're going to get private sector money. It might be a private bank digital currency. It might be a stable coin, but it's all going to be programmable. At this point, America's not going to accept a central bank digital currency.
We'll see. Okay. Because if we have a large enough crisis and people are starving and they're hungry and they're hopeless, then why in the world they're going to do whatever they have to do to feed their children, which could also be a revolution. And, we're going to see, because one thing they know how to do is to transition us from one form of money into the next form of money without us realizing that that's what they're doing until it's too late to do anything about. And my battle, I've realized this, and I'm willing to own it. I'm willing to do, this is my promise to everybody. I will show up and I will do the work. because we need to have a sound money system. We need to have a seat at the table. And the only way that I can see us having a seat at the table is if on a global basis, we convert this garbage, which has no intrinsic value, it's used one place, into this real money, sound money that is used in every place. Now, what's going to happen on the other side of this? Well, yeah, I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that we're going into digital currencies, but I don't think it's a smooth road, and I don't think it's without a lot of problems. So everybody needs to do what they're comfortable, but this is the point of true diversification. Wall Street wants you to think stocks, bonds, cryptos, diversified, but they're all intangible, not diversified. Stocks, bonds, cryptos, make sure you got gold to protect whatever fiat money wealth you're holding in there. So then you're properly balanced. I'm not saying that I have all of the answers. And I'm not saying that I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. But what I can tell you is that I have been studying this on some level since 1964.
For a long time.
You know, I'm glad. I'm going to be 70 in October, right? I'm going to be 70 years old. I am so grateful to be old because I lived through a currency transition. I lived through it. And I've been guided to work in banking, to become a stockbroker so that I understand the language of the markets. And if I don't understand, I'm willing to dig and dig and dig and dig and dig until I am able to understand that. These guys know how to make this transition. They get it visible. They get people using it. And then when that digital currency comes in, whether it's a CBDC or some other controlled digital currency, people just go, oh, okay. And maybe because of my age, where, you know, I didn't grow up having, you know, a cell phone on me. I remember the pagers, which I thought was phenomenal. Pagers,
I had a beeper.
Right? And then going into the digital phones. I mean, there's a lot of good in this technology, but they need to transition us into a new system because officially there's virtually no purchasing power left in this. You just go to the Federal Reserve Education Department, the Fred website, put in purchasing power of the consumer dollar, and you're going to see its relentless march to zero because that is the true fundamental value. I haven't, maybe you can help me with this, Chris.
Okay.
I can tell you easily what the fundamental value, the true value for its most important function is for gold and silver, which is to hold your assets even. And since this is a derivative of this, that they used it to mimic it, you just take all the debt that's been created, because that's how they create money in the system, and you divide it by all the gold that exists in the whole world because it's indestructible. And that's in-ground gold and above ground gold. So I could tell you what the real value of an ounce of this is and an ounce of this is. How do you get the fundamental value of Bitcoin? That I haven't figured out, and maybe you can help me with that. I'm not doing it to be bitchy.
No, I get you. It's, I mean, I would say it's just based on, you know, like the free market giving it value. I mean, we give value to things, but it's also backed by energy as well. Now, I'm not the most techie person to kind of get into because of the mining aspect. There is energy that's behind the creation of these the proof of work cryptocurrencies.
But can you release the energy that it took to create that Bitcoin back into people's homes?
Not necessarily. I don't think so necessarily, but they are using things like flare gas, which is excess gas that can't be used in any other aspect. They're using that to actually do mining. They're using different resources for power where they're not trying to consume just basically off the electric grid. We're seeing solar. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things. Volcanoes. So they're using a lot of different technologies to be able to create energy that's thinking more outside the box and not using the typical electrical outlets that we think about.
Right. And there are certainly costs to mine this stuff, right? And mint it and do all of that. But the energy costs they just go into mining it, right? The difference between something like a cryptocurrency and gold, physical gold and silver, is in its broad-based use, its functionality, its value in creating, solar and in creating, space travel and in jewelry, as well as the financial system, as well as art, as well as you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's the functionality of the asset. And even though I readily admit that is the direction that we're going in, and I can see good in it, and to your point earlier, there's good and there's evil, I'm just going to safety to what has historically been the flight to safety asset, and why global central bankers are accumulating it as the fastest rate that they ever have since tracking began back in the 50s, or even earlier than that. There's a reason why they're doing that.
I mean, in my opinion, I kind of feel like this individual or group known as Satoshi Nakamoto created this decentralized currency with scarcity that wasn't created by governments, cannot be manipulated by, or more being minted and created. So that scarcity is going to be there. You're not going to have to worry about the inflationary aspects of it. It was kind of giving us a tool to get away from the banks. And I understand we have gold and silver, but at the same time, just like most people would complain about, if you're dealing with large sums of value, then it's not exactly cumbersome to be using gold and silver. I mean, you're carrying around bags full of things, whereas something like Bitcoin, you can actually save the information for the seed phrase in your head with the backup and travel over borders, get another device and be able to and then you see people in India getting arrested for trying to smuggle gold in their butts.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's why I'm a proponent of both. That's why I'm not like sitting here being like a crypto maxi saying, screw gold and silver. I love gold and silver. I think that these two things complement each other.
I think they can, absolutely.
Gold and silver is designed to, in my opinion, as a way to presently preserve what we have. And Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies give us an opportunity to expound and expand what we have and actually build wealth for the everyday individual, which I don't think a lot of times those opportunities come to many people. I've seen a lot of people's lives be changed since 2017 because of this technology and investments, that they would not have had those opportunities, because we see what's happening with GameStop. And
right?
I'm sorry, what?
The value in terms of this stuff rose very quickly, right? Got everybody's attention.
Right.
More people using it so that it became a lot more normal.
You're talking about Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is denominated in dollars. And, I know there's a lot of speculation that these technologies are created by the government. I mean, ultimately, do you think that cryptocurrency was, or Bitcoin specifically, or just in general, do you feel like these technologies were put out by the government so that it would be training wheels to get us ready for what's coming, which is the digital system?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, because I wish I didn't feel that way. And maybe because I work so much in the belly of the beast, I don't have any confidence or trust in them. And the timing is very, very interesting. I mean, Bitcoin came out in January of 2009. Quantitative easing came out in March of 2009. I just don't know how many coincidences there are, but I do know, and they say it themselves, meaning central bankers admit it themselves, we know how to make this change. We have to keep things appearing as normal as possible. And, I was having a conversation with Jacqueline, the president of my company, this morning, and we were talking about that and how things are made to appear to be normal so that they can make the shift. But I'd like you to look back to 2019. And the world is not the same as it was in 2019. And go back to 2007. The world is not the same as it was back in 2007. But because there were, in both those cases, huge crises that came, right? When that stuff kind of calmed down, people are going, oh, thank God it's getting back to normal. But it never gets back to normal. It gets back to a different level. And because they've lifted the stressors a little bit for some people, not for all people. There's still people that are reeling and have never recouped from the experience they had in 2008. And a whole lot more people that have come in that market don't even remember what happened in 2008, right?
Right.
And a lot of things that happened that, I mean, good God, in 2019, what was happening? You had a global rise in protests, and, you know, people were very uncomfortable. I mean, look at Hong Kong is like the absolute perfect example of that. Right?
The yellow vest movement and stuff. And then also we have seen the repo market and what was happening to the economy. So that's where the timing of COVID was just very, very, very convenient. Very convenient.
Right? It was very convenient. And, you know, I mean, God, go into a grocery store. It looks like it's full. Take the first row off. Guess what you see? A big fat nothing. So I like to go, what if I'm right and what if I'm wrong? So to your point, even though I personally don't own any cryptocurrencies yet, I do foresee a period of time after this mess when I would convert some of this into whatever that new currency is. My battle, this is really, I mean, I started seeing it in August when I went to and did those events in Australia. My battle is in creating community locally, because in 2008, I knew the system died. And that's when I started building my urban farm and created my mantra, because that's what I was doing for myself. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. We don't have that much time left. I can't tell you it's going to be Tuesday morning at 8:35, but quite honestly, it could be. So it is critically important that wherever you are in this world and you're listening to this, that you go out and you create that community to ensure that you have security in all of those areas, right? That's so important, because you just don't have the luxury of time that I've had. But globally, the global community must come together in order to have a seat at the table in the next currency that they want to put us in. And it's a tall order. You know, it's funny, when I first started seeing this person, and he said to me, well, you know, I'm just one person. What can I do? I can't change the world. And I looked at him and I said, isn't it interesting that a person that thinks that they can't change the world is now with a person that thinks she can? I don't know whether or not I'm going to be successful at this, but I'm going to die trying. I'm telling you right now, because this is the battle for everyone's children. Me, I'm old. I'm 70. I'll probably live another 30 years. And, you know, honestly, I'm okay. And my family would be okay. But it's everybody else's family. I cannot stand how they lie and they lie and they lie. And you know what was so interesting? I was listening to Powell in front of the Senate Banking Committee, and he brought up how important it was for these central banks to be transparent right after the stress test came out on the big banks. And hey, yay, 31, all of them passed. Rock and roll hoochie coo. JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citi, all of these big banks also came out between last year and this year talking about how opaque a lot of what they do in those stress tests are, and the numbers that they come up with are different than the numbers that the Fed comes up with. Oh my God.
This is the reality that we live in.
Well, we don't have to.
We don't, but it's here now.
What?
I said we don't, but it is here now, and we definitely need to change that.
Change it. Change it. This is how you change it. Peacefully, quietly, just accumulate gold and silver. If enough people around the world do that, we've got a shot at having a seat at the table on this next iteration. If you don't do that, then you're going to get even worse than what we've had, because they'll have a lot more control, and you are just collateral damage. Well,
you know, I really wish, like what you said, we can make come to fruition, take the power away. I mean, if we use counter economics, whatever the thing it is, not using the dollars, the fiat money, using whether it's bartering or whatever the situation might be, counter economics. And then there was something else that I was thinking of when you were saying that, and it'll probably come back to me here in just a moment. I completely lost that thought, and I apologize. I was also wanting to make sure I was being conscious of time, because we've gone over a little bit of the time that we had scheduled together. So I appreciate you. We definitely need to continue this conversation with the cryptocurrency stuff. There's a lot more things that I would like to get into, and I think what would probably be best if I sent you some information to kind of look at and review, which I know I've sent you some stuff before, but I kind of want to show you some of the people that created, like early cryptographers, the cypherpunk movement, and that kind of stuff. So you can kind of gauge what the viewpoint of those individuals were with trying to create these technologies. Because this really all came down to privacy from a lot of standpoints.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know pseudo-anonymity is not complete privacy, but it's a form of anonymity, the pseudo-anonymity. But
it is. And honestly, Chris, I can see the good in it. I really can see the good in it. But I can also see how those that are in power can use it to enslave us. And we just want to have a seat at the table so that it is a more fair system.
I agree. And and the last thing with the cryptocurrencies is decentralized cryptocurrencies that are going to offer us more opportunity. It's the centralized change that we need to worry about, that they're pushing onto the masses. Like, for example, Solana, even XRP. I mean, there's a big difference in just looking at XRP and Bitcoin when you compare just those two different entities to each other. What they're created for, what their use case is, their supply, everything to that effect. I mean, so each project in a way is its own animal within this whole ecosystem of blockchain and cryptocurrency. I'll definitely send you some information, but before we wrap things up, I want to take go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and you're talking about doing an on-site visit, right? And so I think that also when you and I are just together and we have a lot more time than we do for a minute here or a minute there in these conversations, that I would love to get into that more, because it's all about the same thing, right? It's all about us taking control of our financial future and telling these guys no.
I love it.
Not okay with me. No.
And I know we've talked about me visiting several times in interviews, and I told you before we started, just so everybody knows, like, I am planning for as soon as it starts to get a little bit cooler in the desert.
Pretty hot here.
And I think, going in July and August is not going to be the best thing for me. So I wanted to wait till summertime's over and fall starts to begin its process.
Yep. And I'm going to hold you to it.
Oh, definitely. I want to come out. I was telling you, I've got several other people out there, my friend Donut and a couple other people. Before we wrap up, I want to remind people to make sure that if you're not already subscribed to Lynette Zang's new YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe. Links will be down below for everything that we talked about today. I also have a link for Lynette's X account, which you can find at the Lynette Zang. And lastly, we have LynetteZang.com, which is the Zang Enterprises page. And now you can get consultations. You could schedule a consultation. Do you want to talk about that for a moment, what you guys are offering over at Zang Enterprises?
Oh, absolutely. We are offering a sound money strategy. We put your goals first. So whatever it is that you're doing, we're going to make sure, if you want us to, that you are properly diversified and you have all the tools that you need, including all those mantra tools, to survive this, thrive through it. But we definitely put you first, and we are on a mission. We've got to support states legalizing gold and silver as legal tender. We've got to come together in community, because that's really what the big fight is, and that's really what the big push is. So we're going to teach you with education, but I also wanted to mention that every Tuesday at noon, right? At noon Mountain or Pacific time right now. That time will change, but I do my program live, and then I take questions. As long as there are questions, I sit there and I take them. And you don't even have to be nice. You can ask me hard questions. You can ask me questions. I won't avoid any of them. And so I really want to stress that, come, let's have this conversation.
Is that on your YouTube channel on Wednesdays?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
On so again,
Tuesdays. I apologize. And
that's okay.
That was yesterday. Yeah, my week has just been totally off. I am going to be going out to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. I don't know if you're planning on visiting. I meant to ask you that earlier.
You invited me. If you'd have invited me, I would have gone.
I thought I mentioned something, but I haven't talked to you since that last interview. So yeah, it probably just slipped through the crack, and I apologize.
That's okay. I forgive you. I love you, so I would forgive you.
I love you too, and thank you so much for everything. And it's been a wild ride. Talking to you since 2018. Again, I just really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming back on for the 15th time. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today's conversation?
No procrastination. The banking system is falling apart, and the fact that you don't see it yet is just because they're not ready for you to see it yet. So get into position. Food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, which I use this for, but nothing wrong to have some cryptocurrencies as long as you're properly diversified. Nothing wrong to have any of those intangible assets as long as you're properly diversified. Get it done.
And we can't forget, you can't forget community. That's coming together. Yeah. Can't forget community. That's the best. That's the most important part to me of the mantra period, because you can't do these things by yourself. And we are tribal creatures.
Yep. And I consider you part of the community, Chris. That's why I will always come on your channel. Happily so.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you as always. So again, I'll have links down below for everything that we talked about on today's show. If you can just bear with me real quick, Lynette, do you want to do the wrap up? Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe. If you're not subscribed, make sure you're still subscribed if you are subscribed, because YouTube has been going crazy with unsubscribing people from the channel. So again, make sure you are subscribed. Smash that like button. And as always, I encourage you to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch you want to see in this matrix, the change you want to see in this world. Question everything. Know yourself. And until next time, practice change. Don't forget to visit ricetvx.com, where you can watch both of my YouTube channels, Rice Crypto and Rice Against the Grain, directly. Find all of my social media links, sign up for my mailing list, and become a member of Rice Uncensored, where you can join me on the private side for less than $0.25 a day. You will get early access to both Rice Crypto and Rice Against the Grain, ad-free, unedited videos, exclusive content, members-only forum with direct access to me, live streams, and more to come, only at ricetvx.com.